In an attempt to get enough money to fulfill his dream of opening his own store, Hakan decides to borrow money from his father, but Neşe refuses to help, knowing that his son is a big swindler. In recent years, Hakan and his friend Memo have started several businesses that have gone bankrupt, yet they continue to try to invest in new ventures. Unlike his son, Neşe has worked his entire life in an antique shop with over 600 years of history, and asks his son to deliver a rug that was purchased by a tourist. That morning, Faisal, the richest man in Turkey, lands in Istanbul to present a proposal to restore the Hagia Sophia, but the media is convinced that he has ulterior motives behind this good deed. After making the delivery, Hakan goes to a job interview and submits his resume to Layla, Faisal's secretary. However, upon reading the young man's work experience, Layla realizes that he does not have the skills required for the position and decides to dismiss him. After being rejected, Hakan leaves, and as he is about to exit the building, he saves the life of a little girl who was almost hit by a chandelier that fell from the ceiling during maintenance. Seeing people gathering around the young man and applauding his heroic action, Faisal orders Mazar to go after him and invite him to join his company. That afternoon, while helping his father in the antique shop, Hakan assists a woman who is looking for a valuable robe that dates back to the Ottoman Empire. Upon seeing the picture, Neşe says he does not have that piece, but his son insists that he saw it in the warehouse. Not knowing if the man is telling the truth, Susan decides to leave her card with him and says that her client is willing to pay a large sum of money for the piece. As soon as the woman leaves, Hakan runs to the stockroom to look for the piece while his father makes a phone call. Later, Memo arrives at the store with 2 suitcases and says that he and Hakan were kicked out of their apartment for not paying the rent. Upon hearing this, the young man feels confused, as he had left the rent money on the table. However, he discovers that his roommate lost all the money they had gambling at a betting house. Determined to start his life over, Hakan breaks into his adoptive father's warehouse at night and finds the costume Susan was looking for. He then contacts the woman to arrange a meeting place, and after verifying the authenticity of the item, Susan offers him $1 million as payment. At that moment, Neşe appears and interrupts the transaction, saying that the costume is not for sale. As the old man prepares to leave, a masked man appears on the scene and starts shooting. After eliminating Susan and her bodyguard, the shooter leaves, and Hakan takes his father to the hospital. During the shooting, Neşe ends up getting hurt and tells his son to take him to a pharmacy called Atak, where the old man is quickly helped by the pharmacist. While Zeynep closes the pharmacy, Hakan picks up the phone to call the police and report what happened, but faints after being knocked out with a blow. At that moment, Memo is being interrogated by the criminals, but refuses to give any information about his friend. Minutes later, when Hakan wakes up, Zeynep decides to take him to meet his father, and the young man manages to have one last conversation with Neşe. In his last words, the old man advises his adopted son to trust those two, and asks him never to doubt his power. While Hakan mourns the loss of his father, Kemal explains that he, Zeynep, and Neşe are members of an association called Loyalty, whose mission is to ensure the protector's safety. According to the woman, Hakan is the protector, and he is destined to stop the immortal's actions. When he realizes that Hakan does not believe a word they are saying, Kemal asks him to put on the costume, and as he does so, Hakan sees a mark forming on his chest. Seeing the tattoo being created, Zeynep pulls a revolver from her waist and pulls the trigger. However, even though he is shot in the head, Hakan remains unharmed, and Kemal shows that the bullet was completely crushed upon touching his skin. In an attempt to help the protector understand the origin of his powers, Kemal recounts that shortly after Muhammad II conquered Constantinople, the capital of the Roman Empire, he realized that the city had many enemies. The 7 immortals, whose origins are unknown, aimed to destroy Istanbul, and to that end, caused numerous floods and earthquakes. One night, Muhammad had a dream that showed him how to identify and eliminate the immortals with the help of 3 artifacts. The first was the Ring of Virtue, which glows in the presence of an immortal. Next, the man was presented with a special dagger capable of piercing the skin of these creatures, and finally, a robe that would serve as armor during battles. Since then, a special connection between the robe and the protector has been established, and according to Kemal, Hakan is a descendant of the first protector, who was handpicked by Muhammad thanks to his incredible strength and power. When he discovers the whole story behind that costume, Hakan begins to suspect that Memo may be in danger, and decides to flee his hiding place to look for him. Not knowing where to start, the young man decides to return to his father's house, and upon arriving there, he decides to call his friend. At that moment, Hakan hears someone breaking into his house and prepares to shoot, but soon realizes that it is Zeynep who is arriving. When he sees her, the young man tells her that he received a message from Memo, who arranged to meet him in an hour. Zainab decides to accompany him to the meeting place, and while on their way to Sultanahmet Square, Hakan receives a call from Layla, who informs him of Mr. Faisal's interest in hiring him. However, now that he has more important things to deal with, the young man refuses the job offer, and when he arrives at the town square, he finds his friend's body. While trying to revive Memo, Hakan hears the sound of gunshots, and Zainab realizes that they have been lured into a trap. After dragging him away from the square, the woman tries to calm him down, as Hakan is completely stunned by the news that his best friend has also been eliminated. Later, when he returns to the pharmacy, Hakan shows an old photo he found at his father's house and asks who Murad is. At that moment, Kamal decides to tell him the truth, revealing that Murad was the previous protector, and also Hakan's father. Upon hearing this, the young man realizes that the stories his father told him about the orphanage were lies, as he could not have known the truth about his past. Determined to take revenge on the person responsible for eliminating his father and his best friend, Hakan decides to accept the mission he has been given and begins a search for the talismanic ring that will help him identify the immortal. In the year 1502, the immortals unleashed a plague that almost completely destroyed the city of Istanbul. However, the protector at that time refused to accept defeat and challenged his enemy to a final duel. Now that he has become the protector, Hakan must have that same determination if he wants to finish the work of his ancestors, and he counts on Zainab's help to train his skills. That afternoon, Kamal gives his daughter the address of a woman who lives in the suburbs of the city with her son. According to him, Aisha is one of the veterans of loyalty, and was given the mission of taking care of the ring until the protector was ready. After grabbing some weapons from their arsenal, Zainab and Hakan go after the woman, but find an abandoned house when they arrive at the address. When they break into the place, they come across a young man sleeping on the couch, and Zainab begins to interrogate him to find out Ace's whereabouts. At that moment, she discovers that Kin is the woman's son, and Hakan says he is only there to ask a question. When he realizes that the two are not a threat, the young man decides to take them to meet his mother and tells them that she has lost her mind. 7 years ago, some men broke into the house to steal a ring, and when she discovered that this artifact had been stolen, Aisha went crazy. While Hakan tries to talk to the woman, Kin walks away and calls his superior to inform him of the protector's arrival. The young man hopes that Hakan will be able to convince her to reveal the whereabouts of the ring, and listens to the entire conversation through a camera. When she sees the mark on the protector's chest, Aisha hands him the ring, which she had been hiding in her mouth all this time. She then reveals that Kin is not her son and claims that they are in danger. So, the couple prepares an ambush to capture their enemy and interrogates him in an attempt to find out who he works for. At that moment, Aisha stands up and grabs the rifle to eliminate the man who kept her prisoner all these years. After destroying the recordings made by Khan, Zainab and Hakan flee, but Aisha decides to stay behind in order to buy them time to escape. According to her, the stone from the ring is in the possession of a person named Sinan, and after saying this, Aisha sacrifices herself trying to eliminate Khan's allies. When they finally manage to leave the abandoned house, Zainab and Hakan get in the car and drive back to the city. At that moment, Hakan receives another call from Layla and accepts the invitation to attend a meeting with Mr. Faisal. Upon arriving at the building, the young man is introduced to Mr. Mazar, who is the head of the businessman's security team. During the conversation, Mazar receives a call and finds out that Kin is no longer alive. When he realizes that this guy may know who the immortal is, Hakan decides to accept the job offer, as this will give him the opportunity to investigate him closely. After doing some research, Kamal discovers that Sinan is a famous architect who perished in 1588, which indicates that the stone must be hidden in one of his buildings. Later, while walking through the streets with Zainab, Hakan sees a man tormenting a group of children and decides to intervene. After asking the little girl to step away, he confronts Sammy, and when he tries to knock him out, the man ends up breaking all the bones in his fist. While Sammy writhes on the ground in pain, Hakan orders the children to take all his money, and after threatening him, the young man leaves. When questioned by Zainab, Hakan explains that he knows that guy and claims that he forces those young people to steal money. So he decided to intervene. After teaching that lunatic a lesson, the couple decides to break into the Hagia Sophia to look for the stone, but they can't find it. So Zainab returns home and begins to mark the areas of the city where the stone could be. After analyzing the map, she comes to the conclusion that the artifact is hidden in the mausoleum and calls Hakan to warn him. Unable to reach the protector, Zainab decides to go after him, and upon arriving at the party sponsored by Faisal, she is greeted by Layla. While the two women are talking, a man breaks into the party and tries to eliminate Mr. Faisal, accusing him of eliminating his father. Luckily, Hakan manages to stop him in time, and Yultakin is taken to the local police station. After the incident, Zeynep manages to get closer to Hakan and reveals her suspicions about the location of the stone they are looking for. However, instead of accompanying her on the search, the young man decides to stay and have a drink with Layla. So Zeynep decides to go find her father at the pharmacy, but when she arrives at the establishment, she finds the old man tied up in his secret hiding place. When she realizes that something is wrong, the woman pulls out her gun and prepares to shoot, but ends up being taken by surprise. At that moment, she starts a physical fight with the intruder and manages to knock him down. However, while being beaten, Amir manages to electrocute the young woman, and she faints. After tying up Zeynep, he continues to search the hideout for answers, but ends up being immobilized by the woman. When he is about to lose consciousness, the young man reveals that he is a member of the Loyalty, and she decides to let him live. Realizing that he has attacked his own brothers, Amir becomes desperate, but Kamal manages to calm him down. After freeing the two, the young man says he was watching Aisha's house when he saw Zeynep break in, so he followed her to the pharmacy, believing she could be his enemy. While being questioned by the police, Yultakin receives a visit from Mazar, who introduces himself as his lawyer. However, when the two are alone, Mazar claims that he was responsible for eliminating the young man's father and threatens Yultakin, saying that if he continues to bother Mr. Faisal, his mother and sister will be next. The next morning, Kamal and his daughter go to the mausoleum to look for the stone and realize that one of the faucets installed outside the building is fake. However, when she pulls it out, Zeynep realizes that there is no stone hidden inside and decides to continue her search. Meanwhile, Amir takes the protector to meet his family, and Serdar, the young man's father, reveals that he was a close friend of Murad's. After taking Hakan to his family's home, Serdar tells him about the day the last immortal invaded the family residence and eliminated his parents. After his father and mother were eliminated, Hakan, who was just a child, was found unharmed inside a closet, as his parents had taught him to hide from danger since he was little. Even though he knows that his father sacrificed himself to save Istanbul, Hakan decides not to continue his legacy and instead invests in his security career. In an attempt to keep an eye on every move the protector makes and try to convince him to accept his destiny, Zeynep decides to send her resume to the company where he works and ends up being hired by Faisal. Meanwhile, Kamal goes to meet an old friend to try to get the dagger back and attacks Timur's security guards. When he goes out to see what is happening, the Loyalty member recognizes his companion and reveals that he is surprised to see him, as Kamal disappeared 20 years ago. Upon discovering that a new protector is back, Timur does not hesitate to help and reveals where the dagger was hidden. That night, Amir breaks into Mazar's house in search of some proof that he is the immortal, and ends up getting caught red-handed. After knocking the young man unconscious, Mazar drags him into a room and begins to interrogate him to find out the reason for the break-in. Later, when he returns to the pharmacy, Hakan apologizes for his behavior that morning and says he is willing to fulfill his duty as a protector, but does not want to give up his personal life because of it. Therefore, the young man says he will continue working for Mr. Faisal, while helping Kamal and Zeynep break into the Ottoman Art Museum to recover his dagger. The next day, Hakan and Zeynep visit the museum to study the security system and realize that there are security cameras everywhere. In addition, all artifacts are protected by an alarm system, so Kamal decides to ask for help from Ceylon, a member of Loyalty who knows every corner of that museum. According to Timur, Ceylon works selling clothes at the city market, and when they arrive at the location, Hakan and Zeynep discover that the person who will help them is nothing more than a teenager. Upon seeing the couple, the girl tries to run away, but is chased through the streets to an isolated alley, where she ends up being captured. Believing that these people intend to hurt her, Ceylon starts screaming for help, but Zeynep manages to calm her down and tells her that she is also a member of the Loyalty. When she realizes that the two are her allies, the girl sighs with relief and tells them that her father placed the talismanic dagger in the museum when he worked there as a security guard. At that moment, Ceylon reveals that her father left her a password that opens the door to the museum's roof, and says that Hakan can use this passage as an escape route. After devising a complete strategy, Zeynep and Hakan wait until nightfall to break into the museum wearing masks and hoods to make it difficult to identify them. When they realize that the place is full of armed security guards, they both hide on the roof and wait for an opportunity to access the security room. After inserting a device to disable the alarm system, the two friends leave, and the next morning, Hakan easily infiltrates the museum after introducing himself as a security technician. Upon arriving in the room, Hakan knocks out the two guards and helps Kamal connect to the security cameras to access the museum's images. Then, the protector activates the malware, causing the cameras and the entire alarm system to stop working. At that moment, Ceylon enters the scene and steals the cell phones of all the visitors. While Zeynep convinces the security guards to go after the girl, Hakan takes the opportunity to steal the dagger and escape. After blowing up the windows, Hakan hears the alarm go off and realizes that his plan didn't go as well as it should have. In an attempt to draw attention to himself, Kamal grabs a gun and starts shooting into the air. This buys him enough time for Hakan to reach the roof. Noticing that he is being followed by the guards, the young man sees no alternative but to jump to the other side of the gates and then run towards the parking lot. At that moment, Zeynep and Ceylon run to the vehicle, and the trio manages to escape, but the woman begins to worry about her father. While trying to calm his friend, Hakan promises that he will find a way to get Kamal out of jail and vows to avenge all the suffering that the immortal has caused his allies. The next morning, the local news reports on the museum robbery and shows images of Kamal. When they discover where the pharmacist works, the police raid the pharmacy, but leave after concluding that the place is empty. That same day, Mazhar discovers that the man who was arrested is Zeynep's father, and shares his discovery with Faisal. The head of security also reveals his suspicions that Kamal is involved in the theft of the dagger, but Faisal reprimands him for making such accusations without any evidence. In an attempt to get her father out of jail, Zeynep decides to ask one of his friends for help, and when Timur sees the woman striking his guards, he soon realizes that she is Kamal's daughter. Meanwhile, Hakan decides to go to work as usual so as not to arouse suspicion, and while taking a coffee break, he sees a suspicious man entering the building. Thanks to Faisal, Yasin lost his job and had his journalism career destroyed. So he breaks into the building with a gun to get revenge. However, before Yasin has a chance to fire, Hakan appears and begins to negotiate with him. When she realizes that the man is completely out of control, Layla hits him with a pen, and Hakan finds an opening to react. After knocking the man down, the protector immobilizes him and knocks the journalist out with a single punch. The police are called, and Yasin leaves the building in handcuffs. Minutes after entering the police station, Timur leaves with Kamal, and Zeynep runs to hug her father. In exchange for this favor, the man asks permission to meet the protector in person and says that Hakan can count on him for whatever he needs. That night, during a conversation with his boss, Mazhar discovers that Hakan saved Faisal's life that morning and is blamed for not properly training the other security guards on his team. At that moment, Mazhar is demoted from his position and discovers that Hakan will be the new head of security. Furious at this news, Mazhar decides to go after his competitor and uses a chemical compound to knock him out. He then drags Hakan to his apartment, and while trying to convince him that he does not have the dagger, the protector discovers that Mazhar has eliminated Amir. When he realizes that Hakan was friends with that young man, Mazhar pushes him onto a glass table, and the protector uses one of the shards to cut the rope that was tying his hands. He then slashes Mazhar's neck, eliminating him. Seeing that man lose his life, Hakan feels confused, as he believed he could be the immortal. At that moment, Layla appears, having heard a noise coming from her co-worker's apartment, and is shocked by the scene. Minutes later, the police arrive at the scene, and Hakan is taken away without even having a chance to explain himself. However, as he is being taken to the police station, the young man sees Layla's necklace begin to glow as she approaches Faisal, and realizes that his boss is the real immortal. As he approaches the crime scene, the businessman tries to understand the reason for Hakan's attack and convinces the police officer to leave the apartment so that he can say goodbye to his old friend. Faisal then goes to meet Layla and decides to reveal his secret. He tells her that he is an immortal, just as his wife was, but now he is the last of his lineage. Years ago, Hakan's father used a dagger to eliminate his wife, so Faisal retaliated and destroyed Murat's entire family, except for his youngest son, who miraculously managed to survive. To prove he is telling the truth, the businessman stabs himself with a blade, and when she sees him unharmed, Layla is terrified. At that moment, Faisal goes to the police station and manages to convince the police that Hakan acted in self-defense. However, after being released, the protector attacks his arch-enemy and strikes him repeatedly until he discovers that he is holding Layla prisoner. To save the woman, Hakan will have to show up at his boss's office with the dagger in an hour, otherwise Faisal says he will never see her again. Meanwhile, Zeynep and her father go to meet Daria, a former member of Loyalty who betrayed the movement and ended up being expelled. Their goal is to discover the identity of the immortal, but they end up trapped in a chamber without oxygen. In an attempt to save his daughter, Kamal helps her reach the air vent, and when she finally manages to get out of the pipe, Zeynep runs to open the door to the room. At that moment, she realizes she has arrived too late, as her father is no longer breathing. Minutes later, Zeynep returns to the pharmacy and finds Hakan. When he is informed about what happened to Kamal, the Protector tries to comfort his friend and discovers that his blood is capable of bringing the immortals back to life. Even so, he decides to go meet Faisal to save Layla, and when he sees the woman being shot, Hakan decides to follow his boss's orders. After removing his shield, the young man is forced to put a sample of his blood in a vial and hand it over to his arch-enemy. Faisal then orders Hakan to hand over the dagger, and after getting everything he wanted, he orders his men to eliminate them. At that moment, the Protector steals a gun from one of the guards and manages to eliminate them with numerous shots. After freeing Layla, Hakan uses a piece of cloth to stop the bleeding and takes the woman to the pharmacy, where Faisal cannot find her. In her final moments, Layla reveals what Faisal told her a few hours earlier, and Hakan discovers that the blood of an immortal is capable of bringing humans back to life. After saying this, Layla perishes from massive blood loss, and Hakan asks Zainab for help in finding out where Faisal is. Believing that the businessman's wife is buried in the Hagia Sophia along with the other immortals, the two friends decide to go there and manage to find him. In an attempt to prevent him from bringing the other immortals back, Hakan knocks the chalice out of Faisal's hands, and his blood is absorbed into the earth. At that moment, the businessman states that he has no interest in bringing the other immortals back, only his wife. In an attempt to stop him, Hakan starts a duel even though he knows he doesn't have his robe to protect him, and ends up getting hurt. His real goal is to get close to Faisal and find an opening to strike him with the dagger thrown by Zainab. With the dagger stained with blood, the woman tries to bring Layla back, and when she is about to eliminate Hakan, the businessman hears his wife's voice. He immediately looks back and is moved to see Ruya alive again. When he takes back his dagger, Hakan challenges his opponent to a final duel, but is interrupted by an earthquake. At that moment, all 5 other immortals begin to rise from their tombs, and Faisal takes advantage of the distraction to flee with his wife. As he stands before his enemies, Hakan looks back and realizes that Layla has been brought back to life. So what did you think of this series? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more series recaps. See you next time.